I'm Leah, 29, female. And my fiance's parents tried to frame me with a devastating lie to stop our wedding. But their plan backfired in the most public way imaginable. It wasn't a single, sudden act of malice that brought us to this point. It was a slow, creeping poison that had been seeping into my life for 5 years. Ever since I first fell in love with their son Alex, the grand, catastrophic collapse of their scheme was just the final, inevitable symptom of a disease they had nurtured from day one. Alex and I met in a way that feels almost like a cliché now, a coffee shop meet cute, where he spilled a latte all over my sketchbook. He was mortified, charmingly so, and insisted on buying me a new one. He was a junior associate at a law firm, sharp and ambitious, with a kind smile that made his eyes crinkle at the corners. I was a designer for a video game studio, a job I adored and was proud of. We were different, yes, but our differences felt complementary, like two puzzle pieces that just clicked into place. For the first year, it was perfect. It was just us. Then, I met his parents, Richard and Eleanor, and the first cracks began to appear in our perfect little world. The first dinner at their sprawling, sterile home was less of an introduction and more of an interrogation. Richard, a surgeon with hands that looked like they'd never touched anything less refined than a scalpel, and Eleanor, a woman who wore her charity board memberships like armor, circled me with polite, predatory questions. A video game designer, Eleanor had said, her voice dripping with a kind of fascinated pity. She turned the phrase over in her mouth as if it were a strange, unappetizing foreign food. How quaint. So you draw the little cartoons that run round on the screen? I tried to explain the complexities of world building, character design, and user interface mechanics, the blend of art and technology that made my job so challenging and rewarding. I talked about the success of our latest title, which had won several industry awards. Richard just chuckled, a dry, dismissive sound. Well, it must be fun to play games for a living. Alex, of course, is on the partner track, real-world impact. Alex had squeezed my hand under the table, a silent apology, but he said nothing out loud. He didn't correct them. He didn't defend the passion I had just laid bare for them. That silence became a recurring theme. Another time, a few months later, we were invited to one of their exclusive charity galas. I'd spent weeks looking for the perfect dress, and finally found a beautiful, elegant emerald green gown that made me feel confident. When I arrived, Eleanor looked me up and down, a faint, tight smile on her face. She pulled me aside, her touch surprisingly cold. Leah, dear, she whispered, her voice a conspiratorial hiss, that's a lovely color on you. For future reference, though, a more classic silhouette, perhaps in a neutral tone, is generally considered more appropriate for these events. I would have been happy to take you shopping. We could have gone to my personal stylist. The implication was clear. I was out of my depth. I was a splash of garish color in their tasteful, muted world. I looked at Alex, who was already deep in conversation with one of his father's colleagues. He hadn't noticed, or if he had, he chose not to see it. The emerald green dress suddenly felt like a costume, and I felt small and foolish. The rest of the night, I felt their friends' eyes on me. No doubt hearing from Eleanor about their son's artistic girlfriend, who didn't quite understand their ways. Their disapproval wasn't just about my career or my taste in clothes, it was about my entire existence. My family was loving, middle class, and grounded. My father was a high school history teacher, and my mother was a nurse. They were proud of me. To Richard and Eleanor, my background was a modest one, a polite euphemism for unworthy. During a family holiday, Richard had cornered my dad and spent 20 minutes boasting about his stock portfolio and the summer home in the Hamptons, only to finish by clapping my dad on the back and saying, it must be so rewarding, though, molding young minds, a noble, if not exactly lucrative, calling. My father, a man of immense patience and grace, just smiled, but I saw the insult for what it was, a power play designed to remind everyone in the room of who they were and what I was not. For years, I told myself it didn't matter. Their opinions were their own. What mattered was Alex and the life we were building. He loved me. I knew he did, but his love came with a tax, a toll I had to pay at every family gathering, every holiday, every condescending remark. He would always apologize later in the car on the way home, saying, they're just from a different generation. Leah, they don't mean it the way it sounds. They'll come around. When he proposed, on the 5th anniversary of our coffee shop collision, I cried and said yes without hesitation. In that moment, with just the two of us under the stars, Richard and Eleanor and their world of judgment felt a million miles away. I believed, with all my heart, that our love was strong enough to build a fortress against their disapproval. I thought a ring on my finger would finally make them see me as permanent, as family. I was so wrong. The engagement wasn't a truce, it was a declaration of war. And they were prepared to burn everything to the ground to win. The moment the word Wedding was uttered. Richard and Eleanor shifted from passive disapproval to active sabotage. They saw the event not as a celebration of our love, but as a reflection of their status, their son. The future law partner could not have a quaint wedding, it had to be an affair, a spectacle. A statement to their entire social circle. My dream was something small and intimate, a beautiful autumn ceremony in the woods, with maybe 70 of our closest friends and family, followed by a great party with a live band and amazing food. It would have been personal, meaningful, and entirely within my budget. When I presented this idea, Eleanor looked as if I'd suggested holding the ceremony in a swamp. "Oh no, dear. That won't do at all," she said, waving her hand dismissively. "The guest list alone will be well over 200 people. We have so many family friends and Richard has professional colleagues who simply must be invited. It would be an insult to exclude them." Richard nodded in agreement, looking at a brochure he'd already procured. "We've been thinking, and the Greystone Estate is really the only suitable venue. It has the right sense of occasion." The Greystone Estate was a historic, Gilded-Age mansion an hour outside the city. It was breathtakingly beautiful and astronomically expensive. A single night's rental cost more than my entire original wedding budget. Richard, Eleanor, that's incredibly generous, but I don't think we can afford that, I said, trying to be polite but firm. "Nonsense," Richard said with a magnanimous smile that didn't reach his eyes. "We see this as an investment in Alex's future. A wedding is a networking opportunity. This is how things are done." Alex, caught in the middle, looked miserable. "Maybe we could look at a few other places," he offered weakly. "Alex, this is your wedding. It needs to be perfect," Eleanor cooed, placing a hand on his arm. "Don't you want to make your mother happy?" The argument went on for weeks. Every idea I had was shot down. The rustic theme was common, the food truck idea was tacky. The band I liked played music that was too loud. They had a vision, and it was a carbon copy of every other lavish, soulless society wedding they had ever attended. Finally, worn down and desperate to make the fighting stop, I sat Alex down. "Alex, this is becoming impossible. They're planning their wedding, not ours," I pleaded. "You have to say something. You have to set a boundary." He looked at me, his face etched with exhaustion. "I know, Leah, I know, but you don't know what they're like. If I fight them on this, it will be a war. They'll never let it go. Can't we just compromise, let them have the venue, and we can choose the other things?" I knew it was a false promise. Giving them an inch meant they would take a mile, but I loved him, and I could see the toll it was taking on him, so I made a decision. I had done very well for myself. My studio's last game had been a massive international hit, and with my salary, bonuses, and stock options, I was more than financially secure. I was proud of the success I had built on my own terms. "Okay," I said, my voice quiet but resolved. "If this is what it will take to have peace, I'll do it. I will pay for it, the venue, the caterer, whatever they want. But we do it my way, with my money. They get no say in the final contracts." I thought this would be a checkmate. They couldn't argue with something I was paying for. Alex looked relieved, a wave of gratitude washing over his face. "Really, Leah, that's amazing, thank you." The final budget we landed on was obscene, to make Alex happy and end the conflict. I agreed to cover 70% of the costs for their 250-guest extravaganza. Richard and Eleanor would contribute the other 30%, a sum they made sure everyone knew about, painting themselves as the generous benefactors of our union. They conveniently omitted the part where I was footing the vast majority of the bill. In their narrative to friends, they were graciously funding the entire thing, a testament to their love for their son and their lovely, if a bit overwhelmed, future daughter-in-law. The tension only grew as the deposits were paid and the contracts were signed. Eleanor would call me daily with suggestions that were actually commands. She insisted on a specific type of champagne that cost a fortune, a 10-piece orchestra for the cocktail hour, and floral arrangements that looked like they belonged in a royal palace. Each time, I would politely thank her for the suggestion and then proceed with the more reasonable, yet still elegant, choices Alex and I had made. Her frustration mounted. This wasn't going according to her plan. She was getting the lavish wedding she wanted, but she wasn't getting the control. I was a quiet, unmovable wall of polite resistance. I was funding her dream event, but I was not funding her ego. I was managing the budget, signing the checks, and holding the final say. The more I asserted this quiet authority, the more her smile tightened and the colder her eyes became. I should have seen it then. I was not just an unsuitable partner in their eyes. I was an obstacle. I had my own resources. I had my own will. I couldn't be easily molded or intimidated by refusing to be the meek, grateful girl who was just happy to be marrying into their family. I had become a threat, and as the wedding day drew closer, I could feel them watching me, waiting for a chance to remove that threat for good. I just never imagined how low they would be willing to go. The attack came 3 weeks before the wedding. It was a Tuesday night. I'd just gotten home from a long day at the studio, my mind buzzing with character sketches and level designs. I was looking forward to a quiet evening with Alex, maybe ordering takeout and forgetting about seating charts and invitation proofs for a few hours. He was already home, which was unusual. He usually worked late. The moment I walked through the door, I knew something was terribly wrong. The air in our apartment was thick and heavy with a sickening tension. He was standing in the middle of the living room, his back to me, perfectly still. "Alex," I said, dropping my keys on the console table, "you're home early. Everything okay?" He turned around slowly and my heart plummeted into my stomach. His face was pale, his eyes red-rimmed and filled with a mixture of anguish and accusation that I had never seen before. In his hand, he was holding a sheaf of papers, and his knuckles were white from gripping them so tightly. "Leah," he said, and his voice was a choked whisper, "we need to talk." "Okay," I said, my own voice trembling slightly. "What is it? What's happened?" He didn't answer right away. He just walked over to the coffee table and laid the papers out, one by one. They were printouts. The top one looked like a bank statement, but it wasn't from my bank. The others were transaction histories from several online sports betting websites. "My parents came to me this afternoon," he said, his voice flat and devoid of emotion. "They were worried. They've been worried for a while. They hired someone, a private investigator, to look into your finances, to make sure everything was okay before we merged our lives completely." My blood ran cold. "They did what?" "Just listen," he said, his voice cracking. "He found this. Leah, these statements show a secret account, an account with thousands of dollars of debt. And these are gambling receipts. You've been betting, Leah, heavily and losing. Is this where all your money is going? Is this why you were so insistent on controlling the wedding budget? Were you trying to hide this?" I stared at the papers, my mind refusing to process what I was seeing. The documents looked chillingly authentic. My name was at the top, along with a string of transactions, deposits to offshore betting sites, followed by larger, more desperate-looking deposits. The final balance on the fake bank statement showed a staggering negative number. It was a portrait of a person spiraling out of control, a person I didn't recognize. It was a complete and utter fabrication. "Alex, this is insane," I said, my voice shaking with a mixture of rage and disbelief. I reached for a paper, but he pulled it away. "This isn't real. I've never seen these websites in my life. I don't have a secret bank account. This is a lie. Why would they lie about this, Leah?" He shot back, tears finally welling in his eyes. "Why would they go to all this trouble? They love me. They're just trying to protect me from getting hurt." "Protect you?" I was incredulous. "By hiring a private investigator to spy on me? By faking documents to make me look like a degenerate gambler?" "Alex, think about it. This is what they've always wanted. They want to get rid of me. They hate that I have my own money, my own career. This is their way of destroying me." I went to my desk, my hands trembling as I pulled up my actual banking app on my laptop. "Look," I said, turning the screen towards him. "Here is my real account. Here are my investments. Here is my savings. There is no debt. There is no secret account. Everything is here. I've never hidden anything from you." He glanced at the screen, but his face was a mask of confusion and doubt. The seeds his parents had planted were already taking root. "How do I know that's all of it?" he asked, his voice small. "How do I know you're not just showing me what you want me to see? These papers, Leah, they look so real." That was the moment my heart truly broke. It wasn't just about the lie. It was about who he chose to believe. For 5 years, I had been the person by his side. I had loved him, supported him, and tolerated his family's endless campaign of subtle cruelties for him. And in the single most important test of our trust, he was choosing them. He was choosing the poison they had so carefully crafted over the truth that was right in front of him. "So that's it?" I said, my voice dangerously quiet. "After everything, you believe them? You believe I am capable of this kind of deceit?" He wouldn't meet my eyes. He just stared at the fake papers on the table. "I don't know what to believe," he whispered, wiping a tear from his cheek. "But they're my parents, and they're so worried." I looked at the man standing in our living room, the man I had promised to spend my life with. And I saw a stranger. I saw a boy who would never be able to leave the shadow of his parents. The beautiful future I had envisioned with him shattered into a million pieces, and all that was left was the ugly, twisted wreckage of his parents' design. The fight went out of me, replaced by a cold, devastating clarity. "I see," I said. And in that moment, I knew it was over, not just the wedding, but everything. I didn't sleep that night. After Alex finally retreated to the guest room, clutching his evidence like a holy text, I sat on the sofa in the dark, the city lights painting silent, indifferent patterns on the walls. The initial shock and rage had subsided, leaving behind the hollow ache of profound grief. I wasn't just mourning the end of my relationship, I was mourning the man I thought Alex was. The man I thought he could become. For years, I had made excuses. For him, he's just trying to keep the peace, he doesn't want to cause a fight. He'll stand up for me when it really matters, but it had mattered tonight. It had mattered more than anything, and he had failed. He hadn't just failed me, he had failed us. He had allowed his parents to drive a stake through the heart of our trust. And he had helped them hammer it in. A partnership cannot survive without trust. It's the foundation, and ours had just been reduced to rubble. As the first gray light of dawn crept into the apartment, my grief began to crystallize into something else. It was a cold, hard, and unfamiliar feeling. Resolve. I wasn't going to cry anymore. I wasn't going to beg him to see the truth. I wasn't going to let Richard and Eleanor win in the way they expected to. They wanted to break me, to send me scurrying away in shame and defeat. They had underestimated me. They saw me as an emotional, artistic girl. They were about to meet the lead designer who managed multi-million-dollar projects and led a team of 50 brilliant, chaotic people. They were about to meet the woman who had built her own success from nothing. I picked up my phone. My thumb hovered over Alex's name. With a steady hand, I typed out a single, final message. Alex, I love the man I thought you were, but he doesn't exist. I cannot and will not marry someone who does not trust me. The wedding is off. The engagement is over. I will be out of the apartment by the end of the week. I wish you the best. I hit send before I could second-guess myself. I turned the phone to silent and set it face down on the table. I wouldn't be looking at it for a while. Then, I opened my laptop and created a new file. Project cancellation. I made a list, a methodical, emotionless checklist of every single thread that connected me to Alex and his family. And one by one, I began to cut them. The first call was the hardest. It was to the events manager at the Greystone Estate. My voice was calm and professional. Hello. This is Leah. I'm calling regarding the Carson James wedding scheduled in 3 weeks. I'm writing to inform you that the event has been canceled. There was a stunned silence on the other end. Canceled, Ms. James, we have contracts. The final payment is due next week. The deposit is non-refundable. I understand completely, I said, my voice perfectly even. As per our contract, I will be forfeiting my initial deposit of $50,000 for the remaining balance. You will need to speak with Richard and Eleanor Carson. They were co-signatories on the agreement and handled all the arrangements. Here is their contact information. I could almost hear the manager's brain clicking into gear. She knew exactly who the Carsons were. They had been the ones making all the demanding calls. I had just handed the financial grenade right back to the people who had pulled the pin. One by one, I went down the list. The caterer, the florist, the 10-piece orchestra Eleanor had insisted upon, the photographer, the stationer. The message was the same for each of them. The wedding is canceled. My 70% contribution is now void as the event is no longer proceeding. I am forfeiting my deposit as per our agreement. For all other matters, please contact Richard and Eleanor Carson. Each call felt like a weight being lifted off my shoulders. I was cauterizing a wound. It was painful, but it was clean. The final call was to our real estate agent. We were days away from closing on a beautiful house. A house Richard and Eleanor had pushed us towards, calling it a suitable home for their future grandchildren. I had already transferred my half of the 6-figure down payment into escrow. Double quotes. Hi, Sarah, it's Leah, I said. There's been a change of plans. Alex and I will not be proceeding with the purchase of the house on Maple Drive. Leah, what happened? She asked, her professional tone immediately shifting to one of concern. The wedding is off, I said simply. I need you to formally withdraw my offer and begin the process of returning my portion of the down payment to my account. This was the biggest blow. This was real money. This was the future I was taking back. It wasn't just about canceling a party anymore. It was about reclaiming my life. By the time the sun was fully up, it was done. I closed my laptop. The silence in the apartment felt different now. It wasn't heavy with grief anymore. It was light. It was the silence of freedom. I had erased the board. They could have their son, their status, and their lies. I was taking my self-respect, my career, and my financial independence. And I was walking away. I didn't know it yet, but the shockwaves of my quiet morning of cancellations were about to rock their perfectly curated world to its very foundations. The first ripple effect of my decision started about an hour after I sent the final email. My phone, which had been silent, began to buzz incessantly. It was Alex. A string of texts came through, one after another. Leah, what does this mean? You can't just cancel the wedding over a text. We need to talk about this. I was just upset. My parents are calling me. What did you do? I read them without emotion, then put the phone back down. There was nothing to talk about. He had made his choice and I had made mine. Then, around noon, The calls I had been expecting began. The caller ID flashed. Eleanor Carson. I let it go. To voicemail, she called again, and again. On the fourth try, I decided to answer. I was ready. Leah, what is the meaning of this? She shrieked, her voice stripped of its usual silken composure. The manager from Greystone just called me, demanding payment. She says you canceled the wedding. Hello, Eleanor, I said, my voice a placid lake in the face of her hurricane. Yes, that's correct. The wedding is off. Alex and I have broken up. You broke up? You don't just break up 3 weeks before a -100-and-50- person wedding. This is a disaster. We have deposits, contracts. Our friends are flying in from all over the country, I'm aware. I said calmly, I forfeited all of my own deposits. Any remaining financial obligations are, I'm afraid, yours and Richard's. After all, you were the ones who insisted on this particular scale of event. There was a sputtering sound on the other end. Ours. We were helping you. We were being generous. You can't do this. You are legally and morally obligated, actually. I'm not, I interrupted, my voice still gentle but now with a spine of steel. I have no legal obligation to marry your son, and my moral obligation is to myself. Not to your social calendar. The contracts you co-signed are now your responsibility. I suggest you read them carefully. I could hear Richard's voice in the background, muffled and angry. Eleanor's tone shifted from fury to something else, a desperate, wheedling plea. It was the sound of a person realizing their perfect plan had just blown up in their face. Leah, please, be reasonable, she said, the shrillness gone. Think of Alex, he's devastated. This is just a misunderstanding. Whatever it is, we can work it out. We can't cancel the wedding now. Think of the embarrassment, the humiliation. I thought. There it is. It wasn't about Alex's devastation. It was about their public image. The time for being reasonable was yesterday, Eleanor, I said. When you decided to fabricate a disgusting lie to destroy my reputation. You wanted me out of your son's life. You've gotten your wish. Congratulations. I hung up before she could respond. The silence that followed was deeply satisfying. A few hours later, a call came from Richard. His approach was different. He didn't yell. His voice was cold, menacing, and full of the arrogance of a man who was used to getting his way. Leah, you've made a very serious mistake, he began. As if diagnosing a patient with a terminal illness, you think you can just walk away and leave this mess for us to clean up. I am a respected man in this community. I will not be made a fool of by a petulant little girl throwing a tantrum, Richard. Your reputation is not my concern, I replied, matching his cold tone. You are the one who hired a private investigator. You are the one who created fraudulent documents. Your actions have consequences. These are them. You have no proof of that, he scoffed. Don't I said, letting the question hang in the air. You seem to have forgotten that I work in the tech industry. Forging digital documents leaves traces. It's amazing what a good forensic analyst can find. A beat of silence. It was almost imperceptible. But I heard it, a tiny crack in his icy facade. He had assumed I would just cry and run away. He never imagined I would fight back with logic and evidence. This will be a stain on your name, not ours, he finally said, recovering his bluster. We will simply tell everyone the truth, that you got cold feet. That the pressure was too much for you, that you broke our poor son's heart. You can tell them whatever you like, Richard, I said, feeling a surprising sense of pity for him. He was so trapped in his world of appearances that he couldn't see the reality of the situation. But lies have a way of catching up to you. You should know that better than anyone. I ended the call. That was the last I heard from them directly, but I knew this was only the beginning. They would now turn to their true weapon, their social network. They would try to paint me as the villain, the unstable fiancé who cracked under pressure. They were about to learn that in a world of instant communication, a carefully constructed narrative can be demolished with a single email. For the next few days, I focused on myself. I packed my belongings, arranged for movers, and signed a lease on a bright, airy new apartment on the other side of town. I leaned on my real friends, who surrounded me with support and an endless supply of pizza and bad movies. I didn't engage with the storm that I knew was brewing in the Carsons' world. But I wasn't naive. I knew they wouldn't go down quietly. My suspicions were confirmed when I got a tearful call from Alex's aunt. A kind woman named Carol who had always treated me with warmth. Leah, dear. I'm so sorry to bother you, she began, her voice full of genuine distress. I just heard the news about the wedding. Eleanor called. She said you'd had a sort of breakdown. That you felt you weren't ready for the responsibilities of being Alex's wife. My dear, is there anything I can do? And there it was, the official narrative. Leah, the fragile, unstable artist, broke under the pressure. Richard and Eleanor were spinning a tale of sympathy for themselves and their poor, heartbroken son who had been jilted at the altar by a flighty girl. They were counting on their social standing to make the story stick. The calls from angry vendors to the Carsons' home must have been relentless. The wedding planner, a woman with a formidable reputation and a client list that included half the city's elite, was apparently furious. A friend of a friend told me the planner was telling everyone who would listen that the Carsons had tried to bully her, and that it was their future daughter-in-law's money on the line, not theirs. The story was already starting to fray at the edges. It was time to cut the final thread. I didn't want revenge, I just wanted the truth. I wanted to protect my name and the integrity I had worked so hard to build. I spent an entire evening composing a single, carefully worded email. It was polite, factual, and devastatingly precise. I hired a freelance digital forensic expert, a contact I had through my work. It took him less than a day to analyze the documents Eleanor and Richard had created. His report was unequivocal. The bank statements were doctored using a common software, and the transaction histories from the gambling sites were complete fabrications. The most damning part was the metadata embedded in the PDF files they had given Alex. It showed the files were created and last modified on Eleanor's personal desktop computer 2 days before the confrontation. My email was short and to the point. The subject line read, "Regarding the cancellation of my wedding to Alex." The recipient list was small but strategic: Alex, Richard, Eleanor, Alex's grandparents, and his Aunt Carol. The body of the email read, "Dear family, I am writing to you because I know there is a great deal of confusion and hurt surrounding the cancellation of the wedding. A narrative is being shared that I had a breakdown or got cold feet. And for the sake of my own reputation, I feel it is important to share the truth. The engagement was ended because of a complete and irreparable breach of trust. I was presented with fabricated documents that falsely portrayed me as having a secret gambling addiction and being in severe debt. This was done, I can only assume, in a misguided attempt to end our relationship. I have no interest in causing further pain, but I cannot allow this false narrative about my character to stand. I have attached 2 sets of documents. For your reference, Attachment A is a certified statement of my actual financial assets, showing my accounts and investments in their entirety. As you will see, I am financially secure and have no debt whatsoever. Attachment B is a brief report from a digital forensic analyst, which confirms that the evidence of my supposed gambling problem was digitally created on Eleanor's computer. Last Tuesday, I truly loved Alex, and I am deeply saddened that this is how our story ends. The decision to cancel the wedding was the most difficult of my life, but it was a necessary one. I wish you all peace and healing. Sincerely, Leah Jamesi. Attached the files, took a deep breath, and hit send. The effect was instantaneous and absolute. It was like dropping a boulder into a placid pond. Aunt Carol called me back within 10 minutes, speechless and apologetic, saying she had no idea and was horrified. She said she was going to call her brother, Richard, immediately. The news ripped through their family like a shockwave. The grandparents, who adored Alex but were also people of immense integrity, were appalled. The story, as I later heard, completely unraveled at a family dinner that weekend, when Richard and Eleanor tried to stick to their story of the unstable fiancé. Aunt Carol calmly presented the facts from my email, faced with undeniable proof in front of the entire family. Their lies crumbled. The public collapse was even more spectacular. The high society they cherished is a small, gossipy world. The story of the brilliant surgeon and his socialite wife trying to frame their son's accomplished fiancé was a far more scandalous and interesting tale than that of a simple cold-footed bride. The news spread from family to friends to colleagues. Richard's partners at the hospital heard about it. Eleanor's fellow board members heard about it. They became social pariahs overnight. The sympathy they had tried to cultivate turned to contempt. They were not seen as concerned parents, but as cruel, manipulative snobs who had been caught in a despicable lie. Their perfect plan hadn't just collapsed, it had imploded, taking their reputation with it. The final piece of fallout came in the form of a knock on the door of my new apartment a week later. It was Alex. He looked terrible, he'd lost weight, and his eyes were hollowed out, filled with a desperate, pleading shame. "Leah," he said, his voice hoarse, "can I please come in?" I hesitated, then stepped aside. He stood awkwardly in the middle of my new living room, a space that held no memories of him. "I saw the email," he said quietly. "My aunt showed it to me." I confronted them. They admitted it. They admitted everything. He let out a shaky breath. "Leah, I am so sorry. I was a fool. I was a coward. I let them poison me against you because it was easier than standing up to them. I broke your trust, and I will regret it for the rest of my life." He was crying now, silent tears streaming down his face. A part of my heart, the part that had loved him so fiercely, ached at the sight, but the rest of me felt a sense of calm detachment. "I know you're sorry, Alex," I said, "and I meant it, but sorry doesn't fix this. You didn't trust me. When it came down to it, you chose to believe that I was a liar and a stranger over the woman you said you loved. The person you chose in that moment wasn't me, it was them. I can change. He pleaded, taking a step toward me. I'll go to therapy. I'll set boundaries. We can start over. I love you. I held up a hand and he stopped. I believe that you think you can change, Alex, and for your own sake, I hope you do. But I can't be a part of that journey. You have to learn to be your own man without me as a safety net. The trust is gone. It's not something you can rebuild once it's been shattered like this. The finality in my voice seemed to hit him. He nodded slowly, wiping his eyes. I understand. He whispered, I guess I just had to hear you say it. He turned to leave, then paused at the door. For what it's worth, they're miserable. Everyone knows. They've lost everything that ever mattered to them, their friends, their respect, all of it. That was never what I wanted, I said honestly. I just wanted the truth to be known. He left. And as the door clicked shut, I felt the last lingering ghost of our relationship fade away. There was no anger left. Only a quiet sadness for what could have been, and a vast, open sense of relief for what would be. In the months that followed, I poured myself into my life. I thrived at work, earning a promotion to studio director. I traveled. I spent time with my family, who were endlessly proud of how I had handled myself. I reconnected with the person I was before my world started to shrink to fit inside the Carsons' narrow expectations. I felt freed. Richard and Eleanor became a cautionary tale in their former social circle. They were stuck with a mountain of debt from the canceled wedding and a reputation that was damaged beyond repair. Alex, I heard, did start therapy and moved to a different city to get away from their influence. I genuinely hope he finds his own way. Sometimes I think about the lie they told. They tried to frame me as a gambler, someone reckless and out of control, but in the end, it was they who made the ultimate gamble. They wagered their son's happiness and their own integrity on a desperate, malicious bet, and they lost everything. I walked away with my head held high, my future my own. And that was a victory more satisfying than any revenge. So, for anyone out there who might be in a similar situation, stuck with in-laws or a partner who makes you feel small, who chips away at your sense of self, know your worth, trust your instincts. Sometimes the hardest decision, the one that involves walking away from everything you thought you wanted, is the one that will set you free. Building a life on a cracked foundation is impossible. It's better to walk away and build something new, something strong, on solid ground.